Hello, everyone. I'm Toby Schifsky. I'm the Executive Director of Dearborn Real Estate Education. And today we're here for the Dearborn webinar. And our special guests today are two people I work with almost on a daily basis. And we're going to cover regulator relations. You know, the key is this, and I talk about it all the time. In this business, it's not easy. It's difficult. And there are hurdles to overcome almost regularly. And that's kind of a good thing. The harder it is, the more selective it is as who can actually be an educator, because with a stroke of a pen, your school can be in or out of business when it comes to regulators. And so today we're going to cover that topic. We're going to kind of dig into roles, responsibilities, how you protect yourself, even kind of what kind of a relationship that you want to have with a regulator, believe it or not, in order to actually protect your business. And I got two people that this is what they do day in and day out, is deal with regulators and deal with the legal ramifications sometimes of maybe a misstep on our own part or an overreach by some regulatory authority. And so let me go ahead and introduce to you Lisa Goyette, who's our Director of Regulatory Filing and Reporting, right? She is a part of our legal team. And Lisa and the RFR team are responsible for managing and monitoring real estate oversight agencies for education providers and pre-licensing, post-licensing, and continuing education courses. So basically all the regulated education we do, Lisa deals with all those regulators. I mean, down to the individual relationship, not only in one state, but in all the states that we do business in. And Preeti is our Vice President, Associate General Counsel for Legal, with over 25 years of experience in the educational and technology services sector. Ms. Preeti is a trusted legal and business advisor to senior management at Kaplan North America, LLC, and Graham Holdings Company, who is the parent company, publicly traded company, if you don't know that. She provides legal oversight of the company's regulatory and accreditation teams. So passionate about providing individuals with opportunities to succeed in their education and career. She also serves as the accessibility subject matter expert for our company. So welcome to Lisa and welcome to Preeti.
Thank you, Toby. It's great to be here.
All right. So Lisa, good to have you here.
Thank you.
You know what? Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to cover a little bit of the ground rules of what we do. This is going to be a half an hour long total. We're 4 minutes into it, and we're going to be done at 30 minutes. Almost every one of these topics we're going to cover, guys, I know could go for an hour or 2 hours. So we're really going to boil it down to some kind of salient points. And then, of course, we're available for questions during the entire presentation. Everybody can use your chat boxes. If you haven't yet, go ahead and open up your chat. The chat is visible and viewable by everybody, so be aware. And then secondly, we're going to be moving through the topics pretty quickly. And so we're going to be done in 30 minutes. And I'm going to ask some polling questions along the way, just so that people can participate. And also for us to understand who is actually here with us as attendees. I know we put this out to all Dearborn client schools, but we get a bunch of different people from the school. Sometimes we get owners, sometimes we get administrators, sometimes we get everybody, even instructors in here. So today's topic is pretty heavy administrative school ownership kind of content. So let me go ahead. I'm going to do a poll. Everybody, the poll is going to pop up on your screen. Click in the poll. Don't use the chat box. Click in the poll. It's all anonymous. Nobody's going to know what your answer is, but we are going to share the answers afterwards so everybody can kind of see it. We have 3 polls today. So let's go ahead and start with poll number 1. All righty. My role with my school is, go ahead and answer the one that fits best for you. Go ahead and answer. Are you an instructor? I teach the heck out of it. I teach licensing, CE, or I'm an administrator, or I'm an owner. Now, if you do multiple roles, maybe pick the one that is the best for that fits this. Sometimes we do let you answer multiple, but this time just pick the one that fits best. Are you the owner? Are you the general manager? I'm not even associated with the school yet. Heck, I'm interested. I'm in the process. This is a great place for you today, because we're going to have people who've been in the business, guys, for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right? Some of these people could probably help us on this webinar today. And I would expect you to play along in the chat if you can. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. 3, 2, 1, 0. You should be able to see the results, everybody. We got 7% of us are instructors, 29% administrators, almost 30%. Owners, 39%, so almost 40%. General manager, 21%, and then not even associated with school yet. Look at that, 4%. So good for you for being here. Oh, I don't know. Can you see the results now? There you go. Now you can see the results. My bad. All right. There it is. And you know which pool you drop into. So Lisa and Preeti, we have administrators and owners and general managers, a big chunk of this. I mean, over 80% of the people on are here. Almost 90% of the people are in that category. So let's go ahead. And we're going to jump into the content. All right, your responsibilities as a school of record. So let's jump right in. I think what we're really talking about here is we're talking about Dearborn client partners. And these client partners are ones who own, operate, administrate, right? A general manager, school director of schools that deliver real estate education, regulated education. And just be clear, everybody, we want to make sure we understand what that role is as a school of record. That means you're the school. Dearborn's not the school of record. You're the school of record. You've gotten your school approved from the state. You've got your course submissions approved. You probably even are doing live education, home study, or maybe you're doing RE Campus, which is our online service that we do for online education. It's a tool for you to use to have access to content and online courses. But let's understand, when we talk about school of record, which is supremely important when it comes to regulators, it's who ultimately is responsible for the student and the student's well-being, and who's responsible to the state. And in this business, the school of record is responsible. Did I get that right, Lisa? I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely.
And Preeti, from a legal perspective, as a school of record, I mean, when the letter comes, and if there's a problem, it's coming to you, right? And it's coming to that school and that person responsible for that school. Am I right?
That's right, because as a school of record, that the agency that regulates you only wants to deal with one person. They don't want Kaplan or a partner to be the middle person. You are fully responsible, fully accountable, and that's what they call the school of record for their compliance.
Right on. So, and believe me, we like I'm the executive director of Kaplan Real Estate Education, and Lisa helps with Kaplan, and Preeti helps with Kaplan. And we know when you get the letter from the regulator, they really want to talk to one person, and that person is the one who's responsible as the school for the school of record for that school. And that is any number of things, because as a school of record, you're responsible for basically the student and the student experience. And what the regulator is doing, and help me if I say this wrong, Preeti, but what the regulator is doing is making sure that they are protecting the consumer. They're protecting the students. Almost everything that the regulator does is built around protecting the consumers. Did I get that right? I think I got that right.
Absolutely.
That's right. And when you become more familiar with their statutes, you'll see the statutes are actually written in that consumer-friendly perspective as well. And sometimes when you get that letter that you don't want to receive, they point right back to the statute and say, this is for the protection of the student that we are making this decision, which has a negative implication on your school.
Right. Right. So, they're looking to ensure that you are not a school that is going to come in and take fees for enrollment and then leave and not provide the education. In some instances, with some oversight agencies, they require education providers to secure a surety bond that helps them to ensure that if something happens, students will be able to retrieve the fees.
Yeah, if you disappear in the middle of the night, they got a way for some recourse for students who maybe injured
Right.
because of your actions. So what am I really responsible for as a school of record? You're responsible for your students' behavior. If they're in your classroom, if they're and how they're acting or reacting, you are responsible for that. Not only the behavior, but their experience. I know that sounds weird, but sometimes you are. And instructor support. So you're responsible generally for providing some sort of instructional support for those students. Course completions, you're responsible for course completions, making sure that they're filed correctly, making sure that they are even recorded and student records are kept for the appropriate amount of time, right? So every state has some sort of record keeping requirement. And as a school of record, you need to be doing that. Right. So here's the thing. I got a bunch of people on here who already run schools and go, yes, we get all this. Right. But we just want to make the distinction because the next section we're going to get into is we're going to talk about exactly what the setup is and how you get the courses approved and what are the really most important and salient points about that approval process that you need to understand. So awareness of, here's the other big part. As a school of record, you're responsible for making sure your courses are renewed or that there's impending expirations. One of the biggest areas we find that schools struggle with is understanding when a course expires or understanding that what happens once a course expires. Can students still complete that course? Let's say it's a home study course, or let's say it's an asynchronous online course. If the course expires, do the students have the ability to continue to complete that course? And or is there going to be a pile of people who are going to be in jeopardy if that happens? And I think, Lisa, from experience, it can be state by state, but generally, what's the answer?
Generally, if there is not an active course approval, students may not complete their courses.
Okay.
So, and it's important because that is so important, that student experience, ensuring continuation of that course approval. And I can't emphasize that enough. File your approval renewal applications, course approval renewal applications as far in advance as the regulatory oversight agency allows. Some states will say, we don't want to see that renewal application until 60 or 90 days before the course expiration date. Some will allow you to file it 4 months, 5 months. And the reason I emphasize this is because we've seen over the last couple of years, regulators' response to application times
taken forever.
Lengthen. So, and it ebbs and flows from year to year. So I just file early
well, I tell you, from another perspective, business, right? So Lisa and Preeti make sure we stay inside the guardrails legally and have great regulator relationships. Me as a business leader, I need to be in business. And every single one of you school operators out there, you need to be in business. And if you don't have a process, if you don't have a system for tracking your renewals and your impending expirations and when those have to be done, that's a recipe for disaster, because if your approval expires, you're out of business and you're not making money. And I know a lot of you know that, but I know some of you have, maybe don't have a system in place to do that. And I don't think we could recommend high enough that probably the most important part of this whole slide is making sure you can stay in business and understanding what your school's responsibilities are, understanding, what your requirements are, and then also understanding how to stay in business with keeping your courses active and renewed. I can't stress it enough that without it, you're out of business.
Implement a process immediately, because if you pick up the phone and call a regulator and say, oh, I forgot to submit this, they're not going to necessarily welcome that call and put everything they're doing to the side and quickly review an applications for you to allow your students to continue in their courses. So it's just from experience,
Yeah, right on.
Whatever.
All right,
But
let's jump on. I'm going to jump into the meat of this. On our next slide, after we get through this, we want to talk about state laws, statutes, and administrative rules. So once again, what can you start us with here? Because we have people who and clients who sometimes are confused, and some clients are brilliant at this. But talk about the kind of the roles and talk about the requirements a little bit, Lisa, will you?
sure. And I'll start with some basics. Find the Regulatory Oversight Agency's website and bookmark it as a favorite. Refer to it often, review it often. Each and every time you must submit an application, review the site to make sure you're using the most current application form.
Oh, classic is they make changes and they'd never tell you.
No,
I don't know. Has anybody ever had the state reach out and say, hey, we've made a change to this form? I mean, you can go ahead and drop a little chat in the chat box. If your state is doing that, and every time they make a change and every time there's a difference, go ahead and put in there, because I'd love to talk to that regulator about how good and kind they are, because they don't always do that, do they?
No, they absolutely do not. And there are some instances where they won't say, okay, you submitted an outdated form this time, but next time be sure that you submit the new form. They'll just return the application.
Got it. And then you're out all that time as they
Yes.
waited in their pile, and it gets to you. So I think the key here is, when you're in the regulated education, you kind of need to know the regulations. In
Right.
fact, you have to know them really, really well.
Right.
And why is that? What happens sometimes if they're not notifying you and you're not understanding, and who's still responsible?
You're still responsible as
Yeah.
the school. You're responsible. And I've even had instances where I've said, you didn't provide an update to this requirement or such. You as the school, I was told, you as the school are responsible for viewing and reviewing our website and basically looking for changes, because that's where we're noting these changes. So you want to review the statutes, review the administrative rules, review application process that's noted on the site, because things change so often. And
How many? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, reviewing and creating and documenting the requirements in your own resource document will help you to understand and retain the requirements. It's just a tool that my team uses that has been extremely helpful. And I think it's just really, really important to ensure compliance with all the requirements.
I think I heard something very important there. And it's about a resource document, right? A place, a repository where you can track all the important statutes, rules, even the regulatory bodies that govern your business. I mean, how many people know exactly which regulatory body is governing their business? In fact, I'm gonna ask a poll question, because there are 1, 2, or more regulatory authorities who actually govern your business on a day-to-day basis. Everybody, let's go ahead. We're going to ask you a poll question, and it's a little bit of a setup, but let's do this. How well, no, let me do this one. No, wait a second. I want to do this one. How well do you know your state's regulator? So how well do you know your regulator in your state for your business? And it might be more than one. How well do you know it? Go ahead and answer the poll. I'm on a first name basis with my state's regulator. How about that? We're like buddies. I'm going to be the godmother of my child. I mean, I'm in with them. I connect regularly with my state's regulators. I'm a diligent business owner. I connect regularly. Now I know where to go, but I'm not really sure who I'm connecting with. I'm just kind of sending it to an email box. I'm not quite sure what department to talk to. That might be along the lines of, I'm not really sure who I should be talking to. All right. We're going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm going to share the results. Well, how about this? I'm on a first name basis, 27%. Ooh, that's actually better than I thought. You guys are on it, way on it. If you are on a first names basis, Lisa, let me ask you, and Preeti, what are the best relationships? What are the best and easiest states for you to do business in? How would you characterize your relationship according to this poll? What are the best ones? Do you?
Well, so I would characterize, and Lisa will weigh in on her specific relationships, is where you establish that level of trust with the regulator and the quality of your programs and your school, because that trust relationship will carry you a long way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Transparency. And I know I'm going to talk about transparency in a little bit, but transparency leads to that trusted relationship or partnership, as I often refer to it as. And so it's really, really, really important. And when you're speaking of reviewing of the website and the statutes, not always intuitive, very difficult to navigate. I understand. Another reason to document what you find once you get to what you're looking for, right, on the site.
Yeah. So once again, have a resource that lists everything, your contacts, where you go to actually read statute or rules. What is the rulemaking authority? Right? What is the process? What are the application forms? Having it all in one place helps a ton. And then a couple things. Understanding that if there's an ability to actually request from the regulator to be on an email distribution list, if there are changes, super important, keeps you up to speed. And then, Lisa, you had a very good point. And I know this is important. When you are actually dealing with regulators, it's great to be on a first name basis. Don't get me wrong. But even after you have a phone conversation with them, what would you always recommend you do, Lisa, on a follow-up after a phone conversation?
A couple things. Document the requirements via email. Confirm that conversation that you've had with the regulator by telephone. My mode of communication preference is email, because for two reasons. I want to show the regulator that I've first looked on their site to see if I could answer my question by referencing a statute, by referencing a page on their site. But that response, their response to you, is going to serve two purposes. It's going to be a point of reference for maybe a future situation, and it's going to be your ammunition should the state come back and say, oh, I may have misguided you, or where did you receive this information? I've needed to use my ammunition before, if you will. But
right on. So always summarize and resend to the regulator. Can't tell you how many times that little paper trail, that little email trail has saved us from issues. And don't get me wrong, nobody's perfect. And we're going to talk about not being perfect in just a second. What do you do? How do you be a human being? And how do you demonstrate to a regulator you're trying to do the right thing when things don't go quite right? Because we've been there, and nothing's better than if you know them on a first name basis. And so let's go on to our next slide. So building relationships with regulators, and it's really where it all comes down to, guys. And I know this is kind of the crux of it. If you're operating in a regulated industry and you're thinking you're just skating along on the surface of the water and you're skimming along like a water bug, and you're not really diving into your regulator relationship, there is no foundation for you. There is nothing for you if something happens, something goes wrong, or you need, right, somebody to benefit of the doubt even. And so building relationships is supremely important. Take us through, Lisa and Preeti. Why are these relationships so important, especially the transparency part?
There's for several reasons. So I think from a student's perspective, so often I will advocate for a student with the regulator. If a student has had an issue or a concern with their course completion and such, and it's outside of the compliance requirements, I will, on behalf of the student, reach out to a regulator and just work with the regulator to find a resolution that will provide an excellent outcome or a great outcome for the student and meet the requirements of the regulator. So there's that, you know, when you—
That's a great point. Your relationship helps your student who maybe didn't do things quite right or the right order, but you know, look at it on whole. Is there a way to be a champion for that student who maybe is in harm's way? I also know there's times when it's not just one student, it's multiple students. Something happens, a course or something goes wrong, and you've got hundreds of students who are in harm's way.
Also, when you are watching for a pending change in a rule and a statute and such, and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting, because as a school of record, you need to prepare. You want to be as proactive as possible. If you have a great partnership with that regulator, great relationship, then they sometimes will provide some insight that they normally wouldn't advertise on a website or in a generally speaking with others. So it helps, you know, build that kind of a rapport, to gain that information as quickly as possible. But also, I just keep going back to the situations where we just need a favor because we had a technical issue, or we had, you know, there's only, as an education provider, there's only so many different situations or things that we have control of. Sometimes we can't really control per se a student's behavior. So if we control every step of the process that we are able to control, but then there's a student behavior, you know, it's really, I could go on and on for hours.
Let me ask Preeti a question. Preeti, you know, we have on here commission meetings. I think, you know, being in front of your commission that is responsible for it, if they have open and public meetings, you know, seeing your face is important, and being able to have a relationship to, you know, sometimes ask for forgiveness, sometimes to champion for the student, sometimes to champion for yourself. What if you have a relationship or not a relationship with a regulator? Are there times when regulators just don't want to have a relationship? And are there times even when you couldn't ask for that relationship, you can't even, and maybe it's you don't agree with what the regulator says? Is there recourse legally if you don't agree with maybe an overreach? I mean, what happens in that situation?
Yeah, so I think there's a few questions that you're posing out, Toby. So you want to have a great relationship with your regulator. You don't want to cross the line in terms of conflict of interest. So we still have to stay in our lane where we're not offering gifts or crossing the line. I have to step back and say we're from a very large company owned by Graham Holdings Company, formerly the Washington Post Company, and integrity and ethics is the key to building that trust relationship. And from the top down, telling all your clients of program and teams that this is what we do and we don't deviate from that. When you have that relationship with the regulator, often they may be tied by the statute and say, we don't have any authority to make a decision outside of that, but you can talk to the commission, you can make a request to the commission. So again, that's where the relationship comes back again, where you can do that. If you come across where you're not making any headway at all, and then you think about whether you may want to start legal action against them, you really have to first gather all the facts, talk to your teams. This again ties in with the resource document that Lisa and Toby mentioned, because you need to have all your information to gather all the details before you can make that decision. Did we do the right thing? Did our processes flow? Did the facts support that? And then you have to determine whether you're ready to cut off that relationship with that regulator, because that litigation is going to cause a lot of damage to your business reputation and trust.
Well, I think the key there is as soon as you, right, employ a legal action, like the communication has to change. The state actually has to, it does its own protocol and says, oh, okay, stop talking to them. Now we got to go through the attorneys. So you can do it. And I have seen educators do it, go that route. It's just know when you employ legal, it changes the conversation. The state actually has to operate by really some protocols, right, Preeti, where it essentially stops your regular conversation. And so balancing it out, do you work with your relationship and your transparency? And believe me, there's plenty of times we've had to fall on the sword and just take it and almost always have documented, here's what we thought, here's what we did, it didn't work out. And we were able to actually move forward with that regulator. But there are times when there's a full overreach, and then you have to weigh it out. How badly do you need to go after it? And once you employ legal, it changes that conversation, and really cuts off some of the avenues of reconciliation too. So let's jump on. I know we're just at our time, but I got one more important slide here. And oh wait, no, that's it. We're there. So what happened here? I thought we had one more. Did we not do course approvals?
We didn't.
All right, everybody, hopefully you can be patient. We're going to do one more thing for you. And this has to do with course approvals. And because there's some questions about kind of responsibility as a school of record. And it really has to do with who's the primary approval holder in a state, right? And so for many of you, if you can look on here, Dearborn primary approval is required for courses, right? And Dearborn will have to submit the course first for approval with the regulator. And that's for licensing. It's in New York, New Hampshire, New Jersey, North Carolina, Texas, Virginia, Florida. You guys can read it. And for CE, it's the other states that are listed there. Now, here's the key. In those states where Dearborn has to submit for primary approval of the content and of the course, the client then has to actually submit for secondary approval. And in that case, Dearborn will provide the content materials for the client upon that request. And Lisa, are there any kind of exceptions to this that come into play?
Absolutely. The states that require Dearborn primary approval want to deal and address with the content producer or the content creator. That's why they require the primary. And the secondary is required because they want to approve the school that's delivering the education to the students.
Got
okay.
It. And so the primary gets the content approved, and then the secondary says, okay, we know the content's approved, but now we got to approve your school.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And exceptions, I think about one exception that comes to mind is Illinois. Illinois does not require primary, secondary approval per se. However, they want to review Kaplan Real Estate Education's application and content and work directly with me with regards to the content. And then they request that I provide secondary schools, right? A permission letter. So you're filing as a primary approval for primary approval for the school of record with just a Dearborn permission letter.
So that's Illinois. That's the exception. But otherwise, you're going to be submitting for approval as a secondary approval, which is really where the course is already approved. They're just approving your school. Or you're going to be submitting as a primary. Once again, Kaplan prepares all the content for you. You get your submission forms, you fill that out, you get a primary, right? So if your state's not listed here, you are a primary approval.
Right. And in some cases, the state requires only a Dearborn permission letter, which basically says
you can use our content.
Yes, right, exactly.
Got it. In all cases, though, you can work with your client success manager and they will help you make sure you get the content that you need. It can even direct you on if you need secondary or primary. And once again, it's at salesops@dearborn.com. And once again, your exception is Illinois. just for the way it's approved, but not for the content. Once again, come to us. We make sure you get everything you need in order to submit. You submit your approvals, your applications and those things, but we'll have all the content ready for you. Did I get that right? I think we did that out of order. I missed it. I thought somebody would have jumped up, but well, I want to say this, everybody. Thank you for hanging with us just a couple minutes late on this. And thank you to Lisa and thank you to Preeti. Appreciate both of you every single day. I know we just touched on all the topics, everybody, but more to come. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.